Hello, my name's Rachael Geddes. I'm the Autism Practitioner for the Child Health and Disability team and also a member of the Pines Neurodevelopmental training team. I'm going to talk to you today about what is the difference between a learning disability and learning difficulties, because I've recently come across lots of confusion, so I thought it might help if I clarified it. So, in the United Kingdom, the average IQ score is 99.1. Okay, we don't often do a lot of IQ scoring. You know, the majority of your children will not have had their IQ tested. The majority of you as adults will never have had your IQ tested unless you've done some online quiz or, you know, I can remember some years back they used to do TV quizzes about your IQ level. Okay, to have a learning disability, your IQ has to be less than 70. So that's a difference of nearly 30 points on the IQ scale. So that means that lots of things that we would expect you to be able to learn by a certain age are not going to be possible for that child and might never be possible for that child dependent on their level of learning disability. When we think about children with neurodevelopmental difficulties, around 40% of autistic children also have a learning disability, and this can range from mild to severe, and about 25% of children with ADHD also have a learning disability ranging from mild to severe. So actually the majority of children with autism or ADHD or any of the other neurodevelopmental difficulties do not have a learning disability. What they have is a learning difficulty. So they've got an average IQ, but their learning is impacted by their inability to concentrate, their inability to focus, relate to others. They become easily overwhelmed. They might have some anxiety issues or some sensory overload. So that impacts on their ability to learn, but it doesn't impact on their average IQ level. It could also include conditions such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, or developmental coordination differences. So the majority of children with a neurodevelopmental condition do not have a learning disability. They have a learning difficulty. So when we're thinking about neurodevelopmental difficulties, these can affect children and young people's development. So they may experience difficulties across different areas, including their independence skills, their motor skills, communication, social interaction, their ability to play, their flexibility of being able to change from one play area to another. They might have some sensory regulation issues. It might impact on their academic and learning ability. They might have issues with attention, memory, organisation and planning skills, their emotional well-being, their mental health, their attachment and their relationships. So if you've been through the NDAS service or you're currently waiting for the NDAS service, these are the sorts of things that your children will be assessed against, okay? But remember, you've obviously gathered that I've got a bit of a bugbear about it at the moment, that this does not mean that your child has a learning disability. If your child has got a learning disability, you will be told as part of that process. Okay, but just because they might come out with a diagnosis of autism, ADHD, DCD, whatever it might be, doesn't mean that they also have a learning disability. I myself have DCD. It's impacted on my ability to learn. It's meant that I've got to do things a little bit differently, but it does not impact on my IQ level. Okay, so the diagnosis for your child might come out as your child having autism, developmental coordination disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, developmental language disorder, fetal alcohol syndrome, sensory processing disorder, or neurodevelopmental difficulties unspecified. Among recently came to me asking, my child's got this diagnosis, but I don't know what it means. And when we looked at it and we talked about it, he'd scored quite highly on ADHD, he'd scored quite highly on autism, but he hadn't scored highly enough to get either of those diagnoses. However, it was recognised that he had significant neurodevelopmental difficulties, but that was unspecified as to what that difficulty was. In Highland, 24% of children come out of the NDAS process with no diagnosis. That doesn't mean that they've got no difficulties, it just means that there isn't a clear-cut diagnosis for that child because the level of their difficulties are not severe enough to diagnose. You know, we can all have difficulties with concentration. We can also all have difficulties with motor development or with finding language. You know, I sometimes splutter over words or can't get words out or can't find a word. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I've got developmental language disorder. Okay, I have some sensory issues that I really don't like. That doesn't mean that I've got a sensory processing disorder. We've all got little bits and bobs of problems in our life. You know, what is normal? There is no such thing, is there? However, don't get me started on the debate of everyone's a little bit autistic, because we definitely are not. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we all don't have our quirks, our idiosyncrasies. We're all a little bit different, and that is okay. Thanks for watching this presentation today. I hope that it's giving you some clarity about what those differences are, because there does seem to be a lot of confusion. I've recently been advertising a course for children with learning difficulties, and I had loads of children apply who had neurodevelopmental difficulties, and it's not actually the same thing. So thanks ever so much for listening. I hope that's clarified it. Best wishes for the future.